Since MBS came to power, there has also been an unprecedented attempt by the regime to silence dissent within the royal family itself. Over the last year, even before the purge, the net had been tightening around the royal family. The whole family was put under surveillance. No prince could leave Saudi Arabia without his permission. Walid bin Talal had to spend his holiday in the kingdom at the start of the year. And anyone suspected of opposing Mohammed bin Salman's bid to become king was being locked up. He even installed a secret prison in his palace for special high-value prisoners. And there were reports of dozens of princes being put under house arrest and unknown numbers of princesses. But the most extraordinary example of MBS's crackdown on dissent we've seen recently, I think, must surely be the public defenestration and humiliation of the former Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef in June. Dethroned, denounced, and put under house arrest, the message was clear. I can do this to him, I can do this to you. Nobody is safe or untouchable anymore. And at the same time this was happening inside the kingdom, opponents to the Saudi regime in the West were also being targeted, like Colonel Gaddafi with his stray dogs program, or the North Koreans hunting down the ruler's half-brother in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur airport. The Saudis also run their own state-sponsored abduction program, targeting dissidents and defectors around the world. In the last 2 years, they have abducted at least 3 royal family defectors and taken them back to Saudi Arabia against their will. The princes that we know this happened to were Prince Sultan bin Turki, Prince Saud bin Saif al-Nasser, and Prince Turki bin Bandar. All 3 were members of the Saudi regime before they became involved in peaceful political activities against the government, and then they were kidnapped and taken to Saudi Arabia against their will between September 2015 and February 2016. The most senior of these 3, Sultan bin Turki, was kidnapped on the 1st of February 2016, along with about 20 members of his entourage, many of them from Western countries. The plane they were travelling on took off from Paris airport. They thought it was going to Cairo, but instead it was diverted to Riyadh. When Prince Sultan realised what was happening, he started fighting and screaming inside the aeroplane with the Saudi flight attendants. They produced concealed weapons and subdued him and controlled the other passengers as the plane touched down. After the plane landed, it was immediately surrounded by dozens of cars and military vehicles, as well as heavily armed Saudi soldiers and police. The prince was dragged kicking and screaming from the plane into an unmarked car, shouting at his entourage that they were all being kidnapped and that they should contact their embassies. He has not been seen since. The rest of his entourage, which included a number of young female Westerners, were then held for 3 days in Saudi Arabia. First of all their electronic devices and passports were confiscated. Then they were escorted to the Ritz in Riyadh by Saudi soldiers, among whom were several of the flight attendants now wearing military uniforms and carrying machine guns. Under constant armed guard without their passports, and in the case of the women without proper attire to leave the hotel, there was no way they could go anywhere. Their phones and electronic devices were later returned to them, with all pictures and evidence of the kidnappings wiped, apart from a few pictures which had been missed. On the 3rd day, the Westerners were marched one by one into a room at the hotel by heavily armed Saudi soldiers, where a military officer apologised for the inconvenience before making them sign documents in Arabic, which they didn't understand. Their kidnappers then asked them where they wanted to travel. Later, they were brought one by one to the airport, walked through security onto a plane minutes before takeoff, and given their passports back. Prince Turki bin Bandar was another of the kidnapped princes that we investigated in our documentary. He had been a senior Saudi police officer, and his responsibilities had included policing the royal family. He knew that he was in danger, and shortly before he disappeared in 2015, he had written a note to a friend saying that he feared the Saudi government was going to kidnap or assassinate him. In November 2015, Prince Turki went to Morocco. As he was leaving to return to France, where he had been living, he was arrested and detained at Salah prison. A few days later, he was deported to Saudi Arabia at the request of the kingdom. The third prince, Saud bin Saif al-Nasser, also had said that he thought the Saudis were going to kidnap or assassinate him for his peaceful opposition activities. In 2015, Prince Saud was approached by a Russian-Italian business consortium which asked him to be their business partner in exchange for a fee. They persuaded him to board a private plane to Italy, where he thought he was going to a business meeting to sign a contract. Like the other princes, he has not been seen or heard of since. This is not the first time the Saudis have targeted dissidents living in the West. In 2003, there was a similar spate of émigré dissident kidnappings, when within the space of a few months, the Saudis drugged and violently kidnapped Prince Sultan bin Turki from Switzerland. He was traumatically injected in the side of his neck and then violently abducted by 5 masked men. Then he was aspirated and intubated before being put on a medevac plane waiting for him at Geneva Airport and taken to Saudi Arabia. He suffered serious life-changing medical injuries as a result. Around the same time that the Saudis kidnapped him, they made attempts on 2 other well-known dissidents. One of them, Dr. Saad al-Faqih, was assaulted and stabbed at his home in London before managing to fight off the attackers. The other one, Professor Mohammad al-Masari, was targeted by a UK policeman who had been corrupted by an official at the Saudi embassy. He subsequently had to enter a witness protection program for his own safety. This recent crackdown shed some light on the purge that is going on today. Emboldened by the total lack of response or criticism from the West, the Saudis have simply pushed on with doing what they have been doing already behind closed doors for several years. They are even locking people up in the same hotel. One factor this time, I believe, is that they wanted to, in particular, get rid of Prince Muttab bin Abdullah, the head of the National Guard. And the purge was a way to do this while at the same time intimidating the family in order to prevent a backlash. Because Muttab was a potential threat to the regime, because he controlled the National Guard. And this worked. There hasn't been a response from the family so far, and very few people are talking about Muttab. If they had just targeted him on his own, things might have been different. The main reason for the purge is, I believe, money. MBS needs to cover the deficit, and he also wants to enrich himself. One of the princes who had been kidnapped said that MBS had told the family he wanted to be the world's first trillionaire, and also the richest man in history. He was not happy with the slow pace of enrichment through normal means like defence contracts, and so he decided to speed it up by seizing his cousin's money. The implications of this are far-reaching. The royal family is now in a state of shock. The problem is, the purge did not go deep enough. To make it a success, MBS should have gone the whole way, like Hitler or Stalin, and taken 5,000 princes into the desert and shot them. This way, the way he's done it, there will be revenge and blowback. King Faisal was killed by his cousin. Why? Because Faisal had ordered that man's brother to die. The royal family is all intermarried, so they will all be affected by what's happened. An explosive reaction from the royal family is now expected at any time. The public reaction is more mixed. On the one hand, people are happy to see such notorious figures being treated like criminals. But at the same time, people do not accept that MBS is doing a clean purge. They suspect he is personally enriching himself. The image of the royal family has also been hit very hard. For years, Saudi propaganda the education, the media, the clerics, has built up the royal family as a kind of noble group with the king on top. And now it is being purged. This image has been severely damaged. This, in turn, makes it more likely that the wall of fear will collapse and there will be a popular uprising. There is also huge damage to the investment environment and capital flight. There are reports that some princes have escaped by paying bribes. Despite all these flagrant breaches of human rights and the rule of law, the Saudi regime remains a close ally of Western governments and continues to receive vital economic and political support. Rather than hold it accountable for what it does, the West's love-in with the Saudis continues to break new ground. The US government is currently fighting to stop an international inquiry into atrocities in Yemen, demanded by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and backed by China. The UK government, which has sold nearly £4 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia since the conflict with Yemen started, has just signed a new security cooperation deal with the Saudis and continues to suppress a Home Office report about Gulf governments promoting Islamist extremism. As Angela Merkel said, no one defends the Saudis without being bribed. Other Western governments are little better. Italy's arms exports to Saudi Arabia doubled this year. Canada just got caught out selling the kingdom armoured vehicles, which have been used to carry out human rights abuses in the eastern province. The French and Swiss governments are still covering up their roles in the kidnapping of the Saudi princes who sought protection in their countries. Nor has any Western government seen fit to criticise the Saudis for kidnapping US and European nationals who were members of Prince Sultan bin Turki's personal entourage and were abducted with him on the same flight on February the 1st, 2016. Collaborating with dictators who do our bidding over Israel and pay us with petrodollars may seem like the cheap and easy option for the West. It has been policy for a long time, and it has certainly worked out well for many Western firms and governments. The impending Aramco float is set to be a bonanza for investment bankers in London and New York. But this is not looking like such a good bargain for the rest of us anymore. And there are two big reasons why. Above all, preventing other human beings from enjoying basic freedoms runs against core Western principles, which is corrupting and destroys faith in democracy. It has led to a rise of anti-Islamic populism in the West and the development of a two-tier system in which Arabs and Muslims are second-class citizens. Secondly, depending on dictators puts us all in danger as it makes the jihad phenomenon much worse. This is because the security services, clerics, and media of Saudi Arabia and other countries, like Egypt, caused the jihad problem in the first place, and so they just pour petrol on the flames. This is why, despite the West deploying astronomical quantities of resources since Al-Qaeda first reared its head in 1998, jihadi groups have expanded on every metric since. Europe is now experiencing mounting waves of attacks. The bomb at Parsons Green Tube on 15th of September was the fifth in the UK this year, and at least 7 other significant plots are known to have been foiled, making this the most sustained period of terror activity in England since the IRA campaign in the 1970s. Clearly, the West's colossal attempts to combat the problem of jihad have been worse than useless. The only long-term solution is a complete change of strategy. If Saudi Arabia had a more normal and democratically inclined political environment and normal levels of freedom, then there would be no room for organisations like Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, and they would simply disappear. But before this can happen, the people of Saudi Arabia need to be free to choose their own leaders, just like in any other democratic country in the world. Thank you.